Alright, so in this tutorial I'm going to go over an advanced shader in cycles. This shader is all procedural, no image is used whatsoever, and I have tried to make a mountain texture, a dirt texture with rocks and with snow. So it's not that perfect yet, as I have not included any HDRIs or trees or rocks or any of such objects. I have a water texture as well, but I'll go over that in another video, or maybe this, but let's see. Okay, first I'll explain this shader and then we'll create a new shader and apply some concepts. So this may look complex, it is, but I'll try to explain it to you, and once you get the hang of it, it's not that complex at all. So okay, so what basically this is a dark dirt texture with a light dirt texture. Note that this is a group, and this is also a group. Okay, so a dark dirt texture combined with a light dirt texture, and the FAC is a noise texture, so we get a random with a scale of 50, the dirt texture. Now the dirt texture is a simple color ramp, and color goes here, and the FAC is connected to a noise, so it alternates it according to the noise texture. These colors change and are applied on the surface. And same thing with the light dirt, it's just a little light and it's B-spline. I think dark dirt is also B-spline. Okay, so now all of these are connected to vector, and I've set the scale to 2. You can set it to 1, that's how you want it to be, but I was not getting the effect with 1. So yeah, and now this, again, these two dirt textures are mixed with a rock texture. Now the rock texture is also very simple in that it is 3 colors combined with, and the FAC is in the noise, and those 3 colors are simply simple stone colors. And now this FAC is connected to another noise texture, and this noise texture is also connected to the displacement of the dirt and the rock. So this rock displacement is nothing but a noise texture, a color ramp, and I've added both. So if you see that the scale of the top noise texture is 2000 and the bottom is 20,000. So the top noise texture is producing a displacement of 2000 and of scale, and 20,000 of scale is for the bottom. So I'm adding both. You can set this to overlay or other things, and this basically, the bottom one with 20,000 scale is basically for the fine particles of dirt, and this one is for the not so fine, the little less scale particles. And then I have multiplied it with a value which I have set it to 0.5, I believe, and 0.3, I think. Value is 1. Okay, so you can change the value as well. And now this is mixed with the rock displace. The rock displace is even simpler. This is just a noise texture. Okay, but this value is bigger, so I'll make it and I'll decrease it to 0.8. Now this is mixed with a white color, and now this noise texture, this FAC is connected to a noise texture. This fact is connected to a color ramp. Now what this color ramp is doing, this is a relatively advanced concept, but it's very useful. So I have used the object coordinates for all, and now this is a vector mapping node. Now this color ramp combined with this mix shader and this this combined with this mix shader and color ramp is giving the snow texture. So as you can see that these are very close. Now if I enable min and max, set x and y to 0 and z to 1, and if I bring these close and add this color ramp as the fac of both this snow, you can set this to white, but I chose this color ramp and with a noise texture, and as well as in the displacement here, which you can give, but I just ignored it as I used B-spline over here. So B-spline basically smooths it out, as you can see here. Now this is smoothing out here, so we get some bumps over here as well. Now we can further decrease this bump level, the main bump level, and okay, so I'll decrease it to maybe 0.5. Okay, now if you see that, it will be a lot smoother. Okay, now I have water as well, so I'll select this plane. Water is quite a simple material. Now I have not done much work on this, but something. So we have a noise texture and a color ramp which multiplies it with it, so it's displacement, and we have mix of a glossy and a glass, and I put layer weight as a fac, and it's set to 0.9 for the glass. So now I'll add this to each and every one of this. I have got around 3 or 4 licks. Okay. So alright, so now okay. So our sun is here, and just going to render this part here so that we can see the dirt as well as the water. So I'll just hit F12, and you will notice that it will not be that high resolution because I have removed all the subdivision modifiers because the vertices count is very high. Now I'll let it render for a while. Okay. Alright, I'll decrease this. And select, change it to 5000 and change it to 30,000, 7,000. Okay, and I'll change the value to 0.3 and 9. So I'll let it render and let's see how this looks after a while. Now while it's doing this, I'll try to explain what I've done in this video. Note that this is all procedural, so there is still lots of work to be done on this, but it will be quite real in some aspects and we'll improve them and change others. Okay, so I'll add a mesh plane. Now this is a new scene, and I'll go to the node editor and I'll go to cycles and I'll add a new material and call this texture material 1. Now with this material I'll try to explain a few techniques, and I'll change it to sun and set the strength to 2, and for world I'll use environment texture, and now I'll open simple HDRI, and you will notice that the scene has lit up. So I'll insert a UV sphere in this, scale it by 0.1 maybe, and alright, so we have this floating. Okay, now I'll set the shading to smooth. Okay, so one more thing which we can do is add two math nodes, set the first one to multiply and the second one to add. Now based on what values we put here, we can increase the contrast, brightness, so this will make the scene more illuminated, but might also produce some more noise, so I'll go with this. And so at the end we should go into settings while rendering and enable multiple importance, so this will reduce the noise a lot. And also we can uncheck under sampling, we can enable clamp and uncheck reflective and refractive caustics. Alright, so next what we can do is, I'll take this plane for now and I'll go into, I'll call this material plane, and yeah, we'll try to make a complex texture. Now we have a diffuse, and along with that I'll add a mix shader. Now this will be different than this texture, and as you know it's coming out, but still I'll have to work on it and change some colors or some settings. Now after adding grass and stones and trees, this will look more realistic, but still there's lots of work to be done on the texture. Okay, but yeah, I'll try to explain this. Now to this plane, this will be a different texture than that, so I'll add a mix shader and I'll add a glossy, somewhat similar, but yeah, overall essentially different. Now if I use nodes on this material as well, which I'll call sphere. Now if I change the shader to just a glossy, now you will notice that we are getting reflections from the sun and from the sky as well. Now if I change this to 0.1, you notice that immediately we get the sky and sun. Now if I rotate it, the sun stays there. So this is now if I reduce this to 0, we get this perfectly. I can set this to 0.03, which might be what we want, but might not be. So I'll just go to this plane and try to explain all of this. Alright, so a diffuse combined with a glossy. Now we can add a color ramp or a mix RGB node. Now this can be used to add varying colors to diffuse or the glossy, and or both. So first what I'll do is I'll add this color to this diffuse. Now if I add a noise texture and just plug the color in the FAC, you will notice that we get varying amounts of black and white, like it's supposed to be a noise texture. So I'll reduce the glossiness for now, and you can see that now as I move this closer, you notice the black parts, they're starting to get more and more, and So now we can go this close and enable B-spline to get smooth. Now we can change the scale. Now this is just a diffuse texture and the color of the diffuse texture is changing. Alright, so now we have normals and we have displacement. So these normals and displacements would give the bumps. So first of all, I change these colors to match a dirt texture, and so we get something like this, and something like this. Okay, now we can create bumps using two ways. Or now, okay, first of all I'll explain the other way of adding colors, like we use the color ramp. Now I'll add this FAC color to the FAC color or FAC to this FAC of the color mix node and add this to color. Now you can see that we get a similar kind of an effect. Now if I change this dark, but we don't get this control of how influenced these colors are. But this is good for other situations. For instance, we wish to add them or subtract. Overlay. Now some modes work for some values and we can get different effects with this as well. Now I'll plug this color here and let's just move it here for now. Now we can add a layer weight node and we can add facing and set it to 0.1. Now this facing node is good for these outdoor scenes and shadows. Now right now this value is too much and this is also too much, so yeah, we get something like this. Outdoor or indoor, it will be good for many different things. Now this Fresnel node would be good for things like cloth, or it does not give, even if I increase this to 0.2, no, it will not give that much glossiness. See, now if I change this to facing, it will be so much glossy. Now if I change this to just Fresnel, it will not be that glossy. So yeah, we can use Fresnel also for our dirt. So I'll make Fresnel with a 0.1 and I'll make it 0.01. 103. Alright, so now there are two ways of adding displacement or bumps. So I'll go with the first way. First of all, I'll add some noise texture and add a scale of 50 and add a vector bump and add the color to height and add the normal to normal. Now you would notice if I zoom in that we get some kinds of normals. Now if I change this to 100, now I'll add it to the diffuse normals as well. So if I'll also add a texture coordinate and the object and object. So we can add color ramp. Okay, I'll try to use the FAC. So we can add a color ramp, and as you can see that we get these bumps. Now these are accentuated now. So if I change the scale to 100, you will see that I get a nice bumpy terrain kind of a thing. Just a minute. And yeah, so now of course we can invert this so that these bumps are going inside, and we can also do a couple of more things. For instance, if I duplicate this, and now if I invert, and if I add a vector, convert a vector math node and add here this and this, and set this to average. No, I think add, but I'll try. So vector goes here and vector goes here. So I'll add. Now if I add, you notice that we get bumps up and down. So we can of course bring in a different texture here and add the FAC here. So now only the inverted bumps are here, but the non-inverted bumps have just a scale, of say 500, and I duplicate this. So here we get something like this. Now another way of adding displacement is if I add a noise texture, and if I add a color ramp. Now if I put the color here and the alpha goes in the displacement, and if I bring these close, now for displacement and normal maps, I would recommend you to do this next step which I am doing. So that would be to add a shader and an emission. Now just plug this emission into the surface. Now you notice that there is nothing here. So that's why first of all I'll connect the object generated of the UV to the vector. Now if you see that, if I go okay, so we have to connect the color. So now you can see that if I change this, we get different levels. Okay, so if I set the surface to this and the displacement to this, you will notice that immediately in our sand there are some displacements as well. Now if I decrease this to 40, you will notice some differences. Okay, now I'll first of all go ahead and save this, as this came out quite good. Alright, so yeah, these are the basics of creating some different kinds of textures, and I'll explain one more step and then we'll end this video. Now what another step you can do is create. Now you can you can remove this bump and use just the displacement, or you can remove the displacement and use just the bumps. It's up to you, but they have little different effects. Now use displacement where height is necessary. For instance, displacement would be more towards the real height, and bumps would be for the small bumps in the surface. So yes, and now what we can do is create groups. So what that means is, if I hit B on my keyboard and select this and say Ctrl G, now if I go up and if I name this group displacement, so we get a lot less nodes. Now what another thing we can do is enable all this and Control G and call this, go back and call this bumps, and if I call this surface, so we have surface, bumps and displacement. So this is a lot less complicated now. Now we can go to bumps and add any values here. For instance, this vector, we can add our scale here, we can add our second scale here, and we can add our first strength here, we can add our second strength here, and yeah, so now if we go back, we can change these values from here. And even in this surface, we can change the colors. So there's group input, there's group output, and this. So now we can change the colors from here. And in the displacement also, we can add the scale, we can add the detail, and we can add the distortion. It's up to you what you want to add and what you don't want to add. So we've got a simple but a fairly complex material explained here. So I hope you had fun with this, and you can now create your own procedural materials with different kinds of effects. And thanks for watching. Stay tuned for another video. Bye bye.